What's up, guys? Ryan here at Signature Edits, and inside of today's Lightroom tutorial, we're going to be editing a bunch of free raw files together, some portraits, some landscapes, a bit of everything, and just giving you some tips and tricks to apply to your Lightroom editing, improve your photo editing workflow, and basically just hopefully become a little bit better at your craft of photography. So without further ado, let's download those free raw files. You can find the link in the description below, and I'll see you on the other side of the intro. All right, so let's do this thing. First off, I've downloaded the photos, so you can go ahead and grab those at signatureedits.com/free-raw-photos. Then we're gonna grab these guys. Thank you so much to @Mikiki and Barn Owl and the anonymous photographers who have shared their work. Really appreciate the fact that you're fueling the community, allowing everybody to practice and get better as a result. So let's go ahead and import these photos. We're gonna do it without any presets. Just hit import like that. Wait a couple of seconds. Now, there's two different ways to edit photos. One is using presets and then adjust from there. The other is to use no presets and figure it all out yourself. We got some great photos today, so a few really beautiful portraits and I think a landscape or two. So we're going to go through, we'll edit those together and just sort of see what comes out. This is just on the fly, figuring it out, so it's not going to be perfect edits. It's hopefully going to give you some tips and tricks that you can apply to yourself. And again, as you're editing along, share these photos, tag @SignatureEditsCo on Instagram, and I'll be able to check out your work. Okay, so first off, I could go ahead and just grab some presets based on what I've already got here. This is from the clean, natural preset pack that I built. So like that would give you a great starting point, right? And then for this particular photo, there's definitely going to be too much grain, so I take the grain down and voila, before, after, right? That's got a nice mix. But, I know what you're saying. You're saying this is a tutorial where you want to see how to edit, not how to use presets. So we're going to try that. We're going to start by just grabbing some exposure, take that up a little bit, and take the highlights down a little bit, and head straight to my tone curve. So I'm going to drop these shadows down like so. I'm going to raise the highlights just a little bit. Okay, so here's before and here's after. Now, if you don't understand the tone curve, watch my tone curve video. It's definitely going to go a lot more in depth than I'm going to cover today, but just for a quick crash course, this is the whites of the image, this is the blacks, and this is everything in between. So we go black, shadows, midtones, highlights, whites. And so it's kind of weird, it looks weird, but all you're doing is you're grabbing a certain area of the image. So for example, let's grab the whites, and you can take the whites up or down. You're darkening and brightening the whites, okay? Same thing goes with any other spot in here. So if we grab the midtones, which is this one, go down or go up, we can brighten or darken the midtones. Same thing goes for the shadows. We can brighten them, darken them, right? And so normally you're gonna be using a lot more subtle moves than the extreme. And we can do a mixture. So we can brighten the blacks, let's say, and we can drop the shadows, and that's going to give us a kind of crushed look, almost a little bit weird, because now the blacks are showing up as gray, whereas the shadows are showing up as black. So you definitely want to dial that back a little bit. Somewhere around there. Now we got kind of a faded, vintagey look, right? And you've also got your channels here, so we could play around. I like to add some green to the shadows. That's my thing. So you can click on here to add a point. If you're not able to do that, just make sure you've got custom point curve selected. And then we double click on the blacks, and now we're just clipping everything below this one point. So anything below there is just going to be green. We're going to add green back in, right? So by doing that, we can add a little bit of kind of like a vintage fade, just like that. And then I like to add a little bit of red as well. Okay, and just find what feels good to you. And of course, if we want to preserve skin tones, we can maybe take some green and some blue out of the kind of mid highlight area. So let's go to the greens. We'll grab somewhere around there, and the blues somewhere around there. And what's kind of handy is Lightroom does a good job of showing you if you take it this way, you're adding blue. If you take it this way, you're adding yellow. So we're just going to take this point and take it down a little bit. And you can see how we're adding some yellow, particularly in that one area. And greens will do the same thing. So we'll add a little bit of green, or we'll take a little bit of green away, see what feels right. Somewhere around there. So here's before, here's after, all with just the tone curve and a little bit of exposure and dropping those highlights down. Now what else could we do with this image? Well, it looks a little bit soft. I'm gonna add some sharpening. I like to go crazy, and then I'll dial it in. So first off, I'm gonna take our sharpening up, our noise reduction up. You don't need noise reduction because this photo has noise, but what it does do is it can be a really great tool for actually just smoothing out skin. So let me show you without any sharpening on. See your skin, we got a few blemishes, more or less perfect, but whatever. We'll take the luminance or noise reduction out, and you can see how it just sort of fades things. So by doing that, we can just smooth out skin and then add detail back like that. So here's before and here's after. right? Her complexion, her skin, beautiful, glowing, gorgeous. Okay, and then with your sharpening, I like to use the Alt key on my keyboard, hold that down, and then grab your mask tool up and down to see what you're sharpening. Anything white is being sharpened. Anything black is not being sharpened. So somewhere around there, feels pretty good. Okay, zoom back out. Before, after. That feels pretty good to me. Now, of course, if you want to get a little bit quicker, you can just use a preset that you like. These are made to be really natural, so that's why we don't have as much of a filmic vibe. But sky is the limit. World is your oyster. You do you. Okay, here's another one. Nice portrait. We're going to do the same exact process. We're going to grab our highlights and pull those down, just so we don't clip anything. And next, let's just see. What do we want to fix about this image? Honestly, the white balance feels too warm, so I'm going to take that down a little bit, somewhere around there. And this one, I think, because we got the smoke, we've got like a really gritty vibe to the actual image itself, like the story that's being told. We don't necessarily want a really clean edit. Like we could almost make that like the contrast between how clean the edit is and the scene that's going on is kind of whatever, exaggerating one against the other. Or we could try and make it a little bit more gritty. So let's take our clarity up, kind of like that. We're going to grab our exposure, bring that down a little bit. And we're going to grab our vibrance, take that down just a smidge. Okay, I mean, you could go all the way, take your vibrance all the way down, take your saturation all the way up, something about there. Then let's go to our tone curve. Let's start by just raising out the blacks, giving us a bit of a fade. And then I really want to like have some high contrast without making it super contrasty. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull off the highlights. Sorry, pull down the whites, kind of like this. We're going to make our highlights really exaggerated. And then our midtones, this is kind of the secret sauce here. We're going to try and dial that in right around there. Feels pretty good. So here's before and here's after. So honestly, it's going to depend on what vibe you're going for. If this is the vibe you're after, well, sweet. If it's not, do something else. It doesn't bother me. What else could we do? Well, we could maybe sort of just exaggerate maybe the color on her tattoos. So I'm going to add an adjustment brush. We're going to go over here to brush. You could just press K on your keyboard if you want. I'm going to grab her tattoos. Not going to be super fussy about it because I'm not going to make an effect that's super extreme, so I don't have to be super picky. We're going to grab the texture, bring that up, and that's just going to really exaggerate again. The tattoos, make them pop a little, add some saturation, and maybe even add a little dehaze. Somewhere around there, okay? And we could do the same thing, so we'll just hit K on our keyboard again for another mask, and we're just going to exaggerate some other details. So the smoke, we could definitely bring out by bringing our texture up, clarity up, dehaze up, and maybe even our highlights up a little bit. Cool. And then one more, we'll hit K. And let's just exaggerate kind of, you know what, let's pretend it's a bodybuilding image because she's got bigger arms than I do. She's ripped. So we'll just grab the shadows. We'll follow them along like this. Easiest way to make yourself look more muscly, just exaggerate the shadows in an image. So let's go like that. I'm going to hit the L button so that I can get back to my normal screen here. And then I'm going to just take our exposure down just to show you. So see how much definition we're adding to her arm. Here's before, here's after, right? Just like that. So if you ever see a photo of somebody, they look super shredded, super jacked. They don't look like that in real life. I'm afraid to tell you. I mean, they might be jacked, but once you see the photo, like what's possible in the editing stage, like look at this. We're going to grab her abs. Bam. Bam. Here's before. Here's after. Cool. I'm happy with that. Something different, something new. Again, post and tag at Signature Edit so I can check out your version of that image. All right, this one's beautiful, like right out of the gate. It actually looks almost like it's been edited already. It's a DNG, so it might have been. I'm not really sure. We can hit reset. That's what we got. We're just going to assume it's a beautiful photo. Somebody nailed it in camera. We've even got some motion blur in behind, it looks like, which is really, really cool. If you're ever wondering how to get that motion blur, well, you know what? It was taken at 1/1200th of a second, so I take it back. That's not motion blur. That's just really cool blur from the lens itself. Anyways, you learn something new every day. If you ever want to see kind of the stats behind the image, you can hit the I key on your keyboard, and that will just give you that as a nice pop-up. We can even see it was taken with a 50mm at 1.4. So really, really nice lens. And let's go ahead and edit. So first off, obviously our white balance is a little bit warm. I like it warm, so I'm going to keep it pretty close. What else needs to be fixed in here? Well, it honestly looks like, for the most part, her skin is pretty perfect. We could add some detail, add some texture, and I think that's going to be about it. So let's start by just hopping down here to our noise reduction. And again, I'm going to use the same kind of tricks. You can see her skin's almost perfect, but nobody is completely perfect. So why not? Let's just take our luminance and see how we just smooth out the skin by doing that. So take that up, and we can preserve the detail in the image by taking that up as well, and preserve the contrast. So here's before, and here's after. So it's not making a big difference, but it's just smoothing out the skin ever so slightly. We can take it up a little bit maybe, depending how it's affecting the rest of the image. That looks pretty good. So before and after, very slight. Okay, next we're going to grab our sharpening, and we're going to add some sharpening just so her hair has a little bit more texture going on in it. Now, always, in general, you want to err on the side of like doing local adjustments rather than global when it comes to sharpening, because you don't need to sharpen everything in the image. But this is just a really quick way to dial it in. We're going to grab our masking, pull it up so it's really only affecting the main lines in the image, so her hair and glasses, that kind of thing. Take our radius down just so it's not so obvious. Again, before, after. Okay, so we're still losing some detail in the hair because of the noise reduction. So now I'm going to zoom out, hit K on my keyboard, and we're going to just do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Mask out her hair. Now you could do this with auto mask, but again, you don't need to be super fussy unless you're going really extreme on your adjustments. So because I'm sort of not actually making that noticeable of an adjustment, we should be okay. So here's before and here's after. See, we just add the texture back to that hair. We can do the same thing, honestly, with the same exact mask on her lips and her teeth, nose, eyebrows, eyes. Now, of course, we do have the reflection of the photographer up in here. So we could try and get rid of that. Probably the easiest way is going to be Photoshop. But the lazy doesn't like Photoshop version, which is my version, is we're going to just grab that, take our texture down, and take our sharpening down. There we go. So here's before and here's after. Something like that. Okay, so we got rid of his reflection. We added some detail and contrast. We cooled the image down just a little bit. And of course, you can get as nuanced as you want with all of this. We can maybe make her jeans pop just a little bit more. Add some contrast. Take the blacks down a little bit. Maybe a little dehaze. Cool. And of course, if you want to go like super granular, you could go in, grab this little healing spot tool. Just grab the couple of places that are not absolutely perfect. I think those are just freckles. But yeah, that's looking pretty good. And of course, if you want, grab the garbage. Basically, if it's not adding to the image, it's probably taking away from it. Is anyone ever going to notice that? Well, probably not, but maybe I would. Okay, so I might warm it up again to see what that feels like. Yeah, I'm going to leave the warmth. I like it just like that. So here's before and here's after. Obviously, very subtle. You can't see it at a distance. You have to be zoomed in to really like notice that we even did anything. Cool. Let's continue on, my people. If this video has been helpful so far, do me a favor, let me know why in the comments below. Like, what was the most helpful tip you've taken away? It'll help you remember it better, and it'll help me know what is actually helpful, what's not. And hit that like button if it's good content, you want to see more of it. Okay, first off, this photo. We're going to assess what's wrong here. Well, we could adjust our white balance up. As we do so, we notice, okay, things are pretty green. So I'm going to take my white balance, try and get it right. So somewhere around there. Still looking a little bit green. We're going to have to shift probably down in the color calibration. And we're going to want maybe our reds to go towards red a little bit and our greens to go towards green, somewhere like that. So there's before and there's after. We've kind of just dialed in her skin. Now it's very warm. So I'll take that back a little bit. Perfect. Before, after. Now that still doesn't look great. That's because this is a very raw, unpolished image taken with a 16 to 55 XF. Wonder what that is. If you know, leave it in the comments below because it's very intriguing. Now we're going to grab our tone curve just to add some initial pop. So again, we're going to grab our shadows, bring those down a little bit, grab our midtones, take that up. Grab our highlights, take that up, and we're going to be playing with white balance a little bit more. I definitely didn't nail it the first time. So bear with me. Okay, so there to there. Now we're looking way too warm still, so we'll dial that back. We'll dial our magenta back a little bit. It's a process, right? You don't always nail it the first time. Okay, that's looking much better. We've added some pop. We've fixed the skin tone. Now we can grab our blacks. We can take those down. Depends how far you want to go. Something like that. A little bit of dehaze perhaps. And then maybe dial the contrast back just a little bit. Cool. Now we can head down to our sharpening. Same kind of thing. Take our noise reduction up. That'll smooth things out. Make sure our detail's up so we don't lose too much in terms of details. It's before and after. Okay, that's looking pretty darn good, honestly, if we zoom out. Here's a suggestion. Zoom out if you want to see it like size of Instagram, and then zoom in if you want to see things that you've missed. So we could, of course, zoom in, hit Command-K, and we're just going to go on her skin like this. Take our dehaze down a little bit, clarity down a little bit, texture down. And if you want to see your mask, just hit O. Okay, one of those. Good. Now our hair's looking like too sharp. I definitely went a little high here. So we can take our radius down, maybe take our masking up a little bit. Cool. And now it's like, okay, what else does the image need? Well, we can maybe make her pop a little bit more. We could go and add a radial filter. So you can either go create new mask, radial gradient, or you can hit Shift N. So grab this like so. We're going to just take the exposure down and invert it with the apostrophe key on our keyboard. And dial it back to where it kind of makes sense, somewhere around there. Good. Lastly, I'll pump that exposure just a little. And there's our before and after. Just a nice clean portrait. The main thing is just practicing with images like this where the white balance is a little bit off is really good for getting a sense of how you can fix skin tones and how to get skin tones looking the way they should. All right, we got Mr. Owl here. I'm just going to do this all in the tone curve probably. I'm going to grab basic S curve because this looks kind of like an S. Take our midtones up, exposure up, and it's looking a little cold. We'll warm that slightly. And I'm thinking like black and white or maybe like a dual tone sort of thing. So we're going to start by just taking our vibrance down. Not all the way, just a little bit. And now we're going to go to our color grading section. And let's just do like a, I don't know, teal and orangey sort of thing. So we'll make orange in the highlights, or those are midtones, whatever. Teal in the shadows. Let's just play around here, see what we get. There we go. So orange in the highlights and kind of tealish blue in the midtones and shadows. That's before, that's after. Okay. Now if you want to, we can play around a little bit more, see what happens if we take our saturation down all the way. Kind of interesting, something different. Maybe add some kind of filmy vibe by just clipping the blacks. You do that just by double clicking any point, it'll make it disappear. So if we go like this, we get a really nice sort of faded image. Before, after. Something different. All right, we got a nice wedding image. Let's just zoom in a little bit. Wedding image, some kind of a styled shoot. I doubt this was a wedding. She's like, I just got married. I'm going to go have a picnic with an apple. So it almost looks like this has been edited. I don't know if it has or hasn't. If it wasn't, well, great selection of greens. Those greens look really nice. We're going to head down to our HSL and just exaggerate them a little more by taking the yellows down in saturation. And you can see that as we do that, we take the saturation out of those tones. Her skin just like pops off the image. Cool. Now we're going to take the orange saturation up a little bit and take the luminance of the oranges down a little bit. And that'll make her skin even a little bit more kind of vibrant. Reds, we can maybe play around with adding a little bit. Somewhere around there. Okay. And then blues, it's up to you. Like that sky, maybe you like it. Maybe you find it distracting. I think we're going to get rid of it by just desaturating that all the way. Okay, so here's before and here's after so far. Now we're going to just add a little bit more pop to the image. I'm going to just take the lazy way out, try adding a little bit of dehaze, play with my black level and my white level. Now this is mostly just by eye. If you want to, you can hit L on your keyboard. Sorry, not L on your keyboard. That would be a terrible shortcut. You can hit these little guys, which for some reason the keyboard shortcut is escaping me. I don't know. But basically, it'll show you if your blacks or whites are clipping, and then you can set your black level so that you're not really clipping any blacks, and set your white level so you're not really clipping any whites. But of course, in this case, our sky is pretty much clipped no matter what. So I'm really only worried about it clipping her dress. And clipping is just when you're losing information. Then we can increase our contrast a little bit. Okay, that's before. And this is after. And you can see that just because the clipping thing says things look good doesn't mean it actually does. So in this case, the blacks, we've gone way too far. We're just going to dial that way back, take the blacks up. Something like that actually feels not too shabby. Again, sort of different, sort of creative. Of course, one last thing that I would do, because we've gone ahead and exaggerated these colors, you're going to notice like the dirt in her dress is really being exaggerated as well. So we can go in here and just grab any of these sections that are kind of looking a little dirty. We're going to grab those like this. And there's two ways to get rid of this kind of yellowish thing, right? One is going to be lowering the saturation and raising the highlights. So we'll do that. Try raising the highlights up. Lower the saturation. And this is a great trick just if you're doing wedding photos as well. Okay, that's option number one. It looks pretty good. Here's before and here's after. So that dress definitely looks a lot better. But we might be clipping it a little bit. So you don't necessarily want to push that too far. You can also take the contrast down or take the blacks up. That can be helpful. Or /and you can also just take the white balance down. And as you do that, you'll see white balance up, white balance down. It naturally just gets rid of those kind of yellowish, orangish tones. So go like that. Make sure we got all the spots. Cool. It's not perfect. I could keep coming in. I definitely didn't do the best job with that mask getting all the spots, but something like that. And then, of course, we're going to have to dial back our highlights because we're definitely clipping stuff. Cool. All right, before, after. Got just a couple more for you. Okay, this one we'll just do a quick edit. We're going to grab our tone curve again, add some contrast, play around with our midtones. Sometimes I find midtones look good if you pull them up. Sometimes it's better if you pull them down. It depends on the vibe you're going for. So like I'm going to just keep it pretty natural right around there. That's before and after. Pretty good like that, honestly. I would probably post that photo. But if you want to, we can maybe just add a little bit of a vignette, make the midpoint a little smaller, bring that feather all the way up so it's much more transparent, and then we're going to play around with the grain. I sort of like having a bunch of grain in some photos. Adds a little bit more of a nostalgic vibe. And there's no like perfect setting. I think that Lightroom, of the grains I've seen in different applications, Lightroom seems to struggle. It doesn't do the best job, but use what you can. Do the best you can with what you have. Okay, and then I'm just going to roll off the whites as well. That's going to give me more of like a creamy kind of look, in theory. Somewhere around there. Good. Before, after. So you don't need presets, especially if your photo starts off beautiful. Like the lighting in this, the pose in this, the colors in this. You can see like we've really got colors that are working together. Lots of browns, high contrast, nice light. It's very soft. The only piece of color that's really not working is kind of the blue right in the back of this window reflection, which once you edit it, I don't think you really even see it because we've just darkened it down. But what we could do, just to be extra, is take the saturation out of the blues and the aquas. Something like that. And honestly, this is looking over edited as I work with it, but we're trying to be quick, trying to get through everything, so we'll keep going. All right, Mr. Siegel, love of my life. All right. I mean, that was weird. That doesn't make much sense. The seagull is not my love. Honestly, with a landscape photo, like sometimes that's all it takes. If you have great light, kind of interesting composition, doesn't need much more than that. Just add a little bit of dehaze for some contrast, drop the exposure very slightly, and look for things in the photo that are taking away from the image. So in this case, we got some kind of something sticking out here. We'll get rid of that. I really love kind of the mirroring of this lighthouse. It's not a lighthouse, but this signal tower and the seagull. It's just kind of funny how they're lined up. So props to you, whoever took this photo. Okay, we got a nice landscape. First off, we got some water on the lens or some dust or something, it looks like. So we're going to try and fix that. Start with the obvious stuff. There's no like, always do an image this way, always do it this way. At least not for me. I just start where I see I need work and go from there. Okay, so that's already remove some distractions, we're doing better. Now we could play around with different exposure. I sort of like it, kind of dark and nighttime-ish, but I am going to play around with the colors a little bit. I feel like maybe the same kind of things we did before, where we lower the vibrance and just play around with our different shadow tones. Like, do we want it to be more of a blue or more of a green? It just depends, right? So I'm thinking somewhere around there. Grab our midtones. Kind of around there. And our highlights, well, I don't even know if I'm going to do highlights. Highlights we might leave pure. So before and after. Now, of course, now I'm feeling more warm, like more of a vintagey sort of vibe. So we'll go like hardcore vintage. We're going to go like that. Drop our clarity down so it feels more like a old school image. We're going to add a little bit of vignetting. Like so. Grab our grain, take it way the heck up. And a little bit of a tone curve fade, just like this. Hello. So, I mean, obviously, that's pretty extreme. It depends what you want to do and how far you want to take things. We could dial it back, dial it in, do nothing to do with this, whatever, you name it. But sometimes it's just kind of nice to experiment, go a little bit extreme, and then pull it back, see what different things you can come up with, right? Because there's 100 different ways you could edit this image. You can make it moody and dark and vibrant, or you can stick with a really classic clean look, right? Like the sky is the limit. I'm thinking somewhere around there is sort of, if I were going to print this and put it in a log cabin, that's what I'd want, right there. So we're going to keep it. Let's pass the log cabin test. Okay, lastly, we've got a nice zebra. Let's just grab his stripes. White on black or black on white, that's for you to decide. Something like that. Honestly, I don't really have much to offer with the zebra. The composition itself doesn't have much going on. So what is there you can do? Well, you can make it black and white. We can play around and do like some crazy colors. In fact, why don't we try that? Just for the sake of playing with the tone curve, understanding it a little bit more. So there's, so far, black and white, we just added some contrast, added some pop. But one thing that's kind of interesting is sometimes you can invert the colors. So instead of having the zebra be black with white stripes, we'll take our blacks and make them white. And take our whites and make them black. And then we can play around with these points until we have something that looks absolutely ridiculous. There you go, right? Art, modern, ready for consumption. So there's our beautiful before and after tone curve. Some things that can be fun, though, is you stick around. Let's maybe not make the eyes completely white because that's just sort of weird. But you can play around with the colors, too, and do the same kind of thing. So sometimes you invert your color channel. Of course, being that it's a black and white zebra, there's not a whole lot going on. It's just black and white. But honestly, sometimes this is just a good sort of exercise, not necessarily in creating an image that you're going to post, but just understanding, oh, that's how the colors interact. When I grab my midtones and take it up or down, that's what it's going to do. And then you can right-click at any point and just go reset all channels or reset channel. And you can experiment, play around. Get something super vibey like this. Okay, so that pretty much does it for this week's Signature Edits. Edit along with me video tutorial. If it was helpful, can you do me a big favor? Can you hit the like button and let me know in the comments below what stuck out to you most? Let's just have a conversation. Let's talk. And if you want some free presets, make sure to hit the links in the description. And that's pretty much it. In the meantime, create something awesome. Hope you have a good one. Peace.